Hi everyone, my name is Mariana and I'm the creator of the Vanellis's Botanical Oracle Decks, and I welcome you to my channel and my cat-infested living room, where I talk about various different topics that currently interest me. And today I thought that I would tackle maybe a little bit of a controversial subject, namely the myth of correct interpretation, and specifically talking about divination and tarot readings, oracle readings, and stuff like that. But I would like to take it from the perspective of literary analysis as well, because it's been a couple of days since I remembered my high school years, and specifically my German literature my German literature lessons. It's been years, okay? It's been 18 years since I left high school, so it's a little bit foggy, so I'm working from my unreliable memories. But what I do remember is that we would write analysis on different works. Could have been one chapter, could have been like two verses from a poem, and a big part of that was 5 to 10 pages of interpretation of that work, and taking into account the themes, the words, the meaning, even the author's life, and everything that we knew about the context of the work and when it was created, and taking on or explaining what meaning we derived from it personally. And to just start this in a little bit of a structure, let's maybe define what interpretation is, or what it means. The definition comes from the Latin word interpretatio, which means to explain, to expound, understand, conclude, infer, or comprehend something in general. Interpretation, in a more broad sense, is about finding a meaning within what we are presented with. It's not something that is fixed or something that can be interpreted as right or wrong. There's only the way you use to get to what meaning you have found, and how solid ground you build for that meaning within your own analytical mind. And when we talk about the myth of correct interpretation, what I mean by correct is the notion that there is some sort of universal agreed upon interpretation that can be construed as factual. We could take this as, in a broad sense, that there is one correct interpretation of media, of literature, of art, of any single piece of painting or book that you find. But also, when we take it back into my little niche, which is divination, that there is one correct interpretation of a card, for example in tarot. I think the core of the need for finding the correct interpretation is the need for validation, and the need to be vindicated, and the need to feel that what we have understood from our spreads and from our divination is the right answer to our question. We often, when we are divining, especially with tarot, because there has been so much literature written about tarot, and each deck comes with its own little book, which is usually structured along the same lines, that there is not that many twists and turns you can take when you're writing a tarot book. So when we purchase a tarot and we do a reading and we interpret our cards, we tend to strive to find the one correct answer that can be validated by external sources, be it the book, or be it, for example, if another tarot reader would interpret that same spread, that we would agree upon what its meaning is. And yes, of course, if we're talking about archetypally interpreting tarot, sure, we can all agree that a combination of 3 cards can mean just a number of certain things. What we do not take into account very often as lay readers, let's say, is the fact that the context of the tarot spread and the context of the divination meaning, of the divination reading that we are doing, is our own personal lives. And it's our own situation, our own circumstance in that moment, but generally also within the week, within the month, within a year. And in the context of interpretation, as I have been taught it in literary, that's a horrible word, literary analysis, is that we do have to take into account not only the specific words the author has used, or the cadence, or the placement of that piece of literature, but we also can and should take into account the circumstance that the author, for example, has been in while writing the work that we're talking about. Meaning that if a sentence, I don't have an example now, I'm not that prepared. If a sentence or like a poem has been written when the author was 25 and recently his parents died and he was struggling with poverty, that would very much color the work that the author did, as opposed to when he was later in life and much wiser. The same verses could convey a different meaning. We also could take the interpretation on a personal level and not speak about what the author could have intended with his work, but also what internal personal meaning and wisdom we can take from that literary work. And returning to the debate about what is the correct interpretation and what isn't a correct interpretation, the way I have been taught it in school, there is no such thing as a wrong interpretation as long as you take in the fullest, most context that you can in mind when you interpret. We were never graded upon whether the way we interpreted a piece of work was correct or incorrect. We were always graded on the depth of our arguments, how many little dots we could connect, how much we knew about the author, or how much we could relate to our own lives, and what meaning, what wisdom we took away from that literary piece, maybe in context with other works of that author, or contrasting with other works from the same period. And the only way you could actually fail was if you didn't go deep enough in your thinking about your piece and thinking about, I'm going to say the word analysis, even though in even previous videos I have been saying that the analytical part of your mind is not the part that should be doing divination. But what I mean here by analysis is perhaps not the logical putting together of things, but the looking at the spread that you have in front of you as a whole, as a literary work of some sort, and letting your own subconscious do the connecting and the piecing together and pulling out things that are maybe relevant in that context of that reading in that moment. The way we did literary analysis when I was in high school was from top to bottom. You look first at the work as a whole. You look at the book or the poem as a whole. You first take note of what emotions it evokes in you, what words are used, what words are repeating, what cadence it has, what it evokes within you as a whole. And then you go into or look at more details and specific chapters, specific paragraphs, how they describe situations, how they describe emotions, again, what other things it evokes, what other images it conjures in your mind while you're reading these pieces of literature, and maybe what other things you have seen in your life, in your reading journey, that are similar or contrasting to the way this author portrays a certain situation or a certain theme. And then you can go even deeper. And analyze the structures of the sentences, whether the sentences are short or long, whether they're very pointed, whether they're long winding, and again, what that conveys in terms of tone and supporting of the themes that you have brought up previously, or if that, for example, completely negates your previous theories that you've had, and what that may mean for you or for the work or for the any wisdom that you might take from that work. And in a similar way, we could look at divination. We first look at the spread as a whole. We look at repeating things like colors or persons, people, repeating numbers, repeating suites, repeating major arcana cards. Not as in like one card more times, but more major arcana cards than, for example, pip cards. And you look at it as a whole, as it is. And then you can look at pairs of cards within that spread, which cards lay together, which cards are far apart, whether, for example, one color is on one side of the whole spread, while other colors are more presented in another part of the spread. If this side, or like this topic, or whatever that spread is more pip cards, or if it's more archetypal, or more major arcana. And then you can read the relationships within the cards that are like next to each other, whether they are more on the negative side, or whether they speak about like material things, emotions, stuff like that. And then at the end you go card by card, and you do what each card evokes in you, and what each card symbolizes to you in that moment, in the context of the authors, which is you, life and circumstance, and what that can relate to that circumstance that you are in, or your friend, or whoever you're reading with or for. And you again compare and contrast these things that you are seeing within the cards with the overall picture that you saw first when you looked at the spread as a whole, and see, does it confirm what I felt, or does it contrast? What nuance does it add to my overall feeling from this spread? And what other messages this like relation between the whole and the detail can bring to the spread? And there you have a way to look at divination and look at the reading of tarot oracle decks as literature, basically starting from the whole and reading maybe on face value, or on vibes, or like feelings, what it brings up, what images it conjures. Here I can also give you another tip from the art analysis world, and that is, when you want to study a painting that you see, for example, in a museum, what my art teacher taught me when I was studying painting was that to like step back from the painting and squint your eyes, so that you like blur the image in your eyes, and you see instead like the shapes, colors, the composition. You can more see how the picture looks in as a whole, without like seeing all the details that are in it. And in a similar way, you can look at your divination spread and squint your eyes a little bit and see if there is something that stands out in the composition. Again, if there are any colors that are dominant, if there are any shapes that are dominant, if, for example, the image of one card smoothly can transition into another card before you even go as deep as into the interpretation of singular cards. And I think that if you try and look at divination more akin to looking at art and looking at artistic endeavors or literature, you can teach your brain to use a different part of it to analyze it, if that makes any sense. You can look at your divination spreads, your tarot spreads, your oracle spreads more as art, and look at it through in my case it would be like left hemisphere, with more of the emotional, the intuitive kind of way, instead of looking at it as data and looking at them as markers of specific meanings that you just must combine and connect together to put together a structured sentence. I hope that makes just some sort of sense. Let me look at my notes. To return back to the correct interpretation, the only way you can find valid validation for your interpretation is when you find a feeling of deep understanding of what the spread means. It doesn't matter if you are agreeing with other people, if you're agreeing with the author of the Little White Book, or with the specific consensus on the meaning of the card. As long as you have found a picture of the answer, of an answer, to be more specific, of an answer that you have received, that fosters a deep understanding with you, that just clicks and says, oh yeah, understand, that is the right track towards the correct interpretation. Sometimes we get really bogged in the book and in the, is this the correct meaning of things, that we get so confused and we are unsure, we are overanalyzing, and we are doubting ourselves. And in that moment, if you are like looking for the correct meanings and you actually do not understand, that is maybe the closest you can get to a wrong interpretation of a spread. Not because it must be wrong the way you have interpreted, but the way to get there is not the correct way to get there. And if you go into a spread with confusion and leave it also confused, or like looking at 5 different directions and not knowing which one to choose, you have again been using the right hemisphere, or like the more analytical part of your brain. I would suggest to really dive into your spreads as you would into a good piece of art, whichever art form you enjoy the most. Look at your tarot spreads or like your divination spreads of whatever, it could be beads, and look at them as you would at art. If we're talking about interpretation, as is literary analysis, is a skill, and it's a skill that can, and if you want to be a reader, should also be honed to some degree. The skill involves recognition of patterns, both literal, now and I'm going to like switch those two words, literal and symbolic patterns that emerge, be it again the clusters of patterns or clusters of symbols that emerge, but also a pattern of going from one theme to another, or a repeating motif that shows up in your cards of some sort. Then it's the skill of being able to search and find meaning in a non-critical way to your process. And that again means the difference between treating the cards as data points as opposed to a language of sorts that is meant to give you an understanding, not meant to give you an Excel spreadsheet of facts. Again, one day I will find out how to describe perfectly what I mean, because sometimes I get the feeling that I get bogged in the language a little bit, but hopefully you get my drift and you get my meaning of what I'm trying to put against one another here. And then there is also part that is about literacy and being able to interpret relevant symbols to your situation. And by symbols, I mean, of course, cultural symbols and symbols that have been, again, agreed upon for a long time, but symbols that are very personal to you, that only have meaning to you and to you alone, and perhaps they would not mean anything special to like somebody else. when you treat interpretation as a skill, there is a certain process that I have partially described already, but to reiterate in a more like concise manner, you look at the piece first as a big picture. You look at the whole thing, the whole spread, and what it evokes in you as a complete piece. Then you move on to examining the parts and comparing and contrasting what those parts, or how those parts change your view and your perspective on the whole, how those parts maybe reinforce the meanings that you have already inferred, or contrast them or negate them or change those meanings. And all of this is valid. Okay, it doesn't mean that if you interpret that everything is great on the whole spread, and then you look at the parts and you see it's all like doom and gloom, that one or the other is wrong. Okay, you have to find where the balance of everything is true lies. And then you look at the details. You can look at the single cards. You can look at the details within those cards and how they connect to your previous interpretation of the smaller parts and the whole. And again, how that connects, contrasts, nuances, changes, shifts the meaning, shifts your perspective, how it colors the whole reading. You look at repeating themes, repeating colors, repeating symbols, repeating things, repeating animals, plants, repeating positions, repeating suites and pips and major arcana cards, other motifs, scenes or symbols, and stuff like that. And from that, you will be able to begin to understand the words and the vocabulary that is being used to convey the meaning that is supposed to be conveyed. And again, I do believe that when you're divining, you're talking to someone, be it your own higher self or like spirits or something outside of yourself. And the tarot is language, and even art is language. Even paintings and visual art, sculpture, it is still a form of language. It is still a sort of way to convey a meaning, to convey a message of some sort. So I want to return to that theme, and I will be like repeating it over and over again, that divination is a dialogue. It is a way of conveying language, and with language it conveys meaning, same as art. To come back to the original thought and theme of this video, there is such a thing as a myth of correct interpretation in terms of divination, and it is the repeating narrative that we are being bombarded with, or maybe not bombarded with, but that we tend to tell ourselves, that there is one objective way to interpret and understand the meanings behind the cards that are in front of you on the desk, and that one spread should be interpreted in the same way by multiple different readers, and that the consensus between readers equals the correctness of the reading. And I don't believe that on a personal level, where we are seeking answers to personal subjective questions, this can be true. Because when we are interpreting cards, we are still interpreting a language that is our own, with our spirit guides, with our spirits, with our higher self. That language will still be personalized and tailored for us to understand it as we are on the spot in the moment where we are doing the divination. And the words that we pick up from that reading will be based on a myriad of different variables that can happen, what we notice in the moment, what we don't notice at the moment, what we know at the moment, and what we don't know at the moment. And I mean know as in terms of what symbols are on the tarot card that we, for example, don't know. That there is a bull on the wheel of life and what that means. Wheel of fortune, and what that means. You may not know that, and therefore that symbol is completely irrelevant to you in the moment where that card comes up on the table. If you know that symbol and you know its meaning, then maybe when it comes up, it could be relevant to you. But if you don't know the meaning behind the 4 animals that are around, there is 4 animals around the Wheel of Fortune for sure. One of them is an eagle, there's a bull, and I'm blanking on the others. And there is 4 animals, I also believe, in the world card on the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith. I'm not sure right now, but probably, yeah, I'm quite sure there is. If you don't know the meaning of these animals and why they are there and what they're supposed to symbolize, those are irrelevant to you in your current situation. Some other reader might pick up on them because they know them and they might be relevant to something else in their life. But if you don't know the symbol in the moment that you are doing the reading, the symbol is irrelevant to you. Yeah, I think this is all I have for today in regards to this topic. I hope that you have enjoyed it. I hope that I have given you some food for thought for future. And to reiterate again, look at your spreads as you would look at your favorite piece of art. Let them speak to you on an emotional, intuitive level instead of on analogical and logical level. Thank you for being here. If you like this, please like it and subscribe for more. And I will see you in the next one along with my cats. Bye-bye.